In the early 1990s, the CIA was facing a mystery. One by one, their top Russian agents, people who'd risked their lives to pass information to the US, began disappearing. For years, analysts combed through data, but nothing fit. The entire system was doing what it always did, searching for answers through a lens they had always used that had worked well for them. And yet the case refused to crack. Until intelligence officers, including Sandra Grimes, began to look at the situation a little bit differently. They began to look inward. What if there's a mole? This perspective changed everything. And they had a break in the case when within months they discovered that financial records and activities were matching up with one of their own CIA agents, Aldrich Ames, who it turns out had been selling secrets to the Soviet Union since 1985, almost a decade earlier. This was a painful breakthrough, but it was also the breakthrough that allowed the system to reorganize, to become smarter, safer, stronger. Welcome back. I'm your host, Jenny Swim, and I'm so glad you would spend some time with me on this podcast today. Today we'll explore what breakthroughs really look like, how to recognize what stage of breakthrough you might be in, and ideas for staying steady while everything in you wants to run from the discomfort of that breakthrough. So what is a breakthrough? At its root, it's the act of moving beyond an obstacle, and it leads to an advancement in outcomes. There's some sort of break or a rupture in what is present, in the way we think, in the way we act, in the way we do things, in the way we see ourselves or understand the world. That break happens and we move through this process to get to the other side, to a place where we have different outcomes, different perspectives, new habits, new beliefs. Our system reorganizes itself and our intelligence reorganizes around this new way of being and doing. There are predictable processes for breakthroughs based on neuroscience. So as we look at these predictable processes, we can take some comfort and maybe calm our systems a little bit that nothing's wrong, this is normal, and we know what to expect in this process. We can break this process down to really 4 stages. The first stage is we recognize something is off. And we often feel questions, confusion, pressure, frustration. Really, in the history of ideas, many breakthroughs stem from working at the edges of failure. There's things that, according to us, maybe aren't going right, and we start to try to solve a problem. The first step is that we get stuck in this frustration, and our brain engages in this preparation work. So what that means is our prefrontal cortex basically starts analyzing. I'm sure you've all experienced a time where you're trying to solve a problem and you're thinking on purpose. You're really working hard to solve a complicated puzzle and you're trying all the usual ways to find the answer. Well, at the end of this first stage, what happens is that our brain kind of hits its limit. We've tried all of these things just aren't working and we feel like we're up against a wall. And that's where we move into the second stage of a breakthrough. The second stage is when we have a wandering mind phase, where we actually back away from solutioning and trying to solve our problem or fix things, and we move into this space of just letting it go for a bit. It's when we stop thinking so hard and we do something else, like walking or showering or even sleeping. We switch to a daydreaming or a diffuse mode. And we're not really focusing on one thing anymore. And while our mind's wandering, it's actually making new connections between different ideas and memories without us even trying. It's working in the background and sorting through everything in a relaxed way. It's this incubation period, and our unconscious is looking for these patterns. Now, if you're thinking, I really struggle to take a break or back away from that fixing stage number 1, you may consider checking out episode 25, Permission to Play, Rethink How You Lead and Live with Dr. Patty Holbein. Dr. Holbein did her dissertation research on the power of play and why this white space in our brain can make such a difference. She also gives you great ideas for starting. So if that would be helpful to you, go check out that episode. So this second stage allows our brain to really take a break and we start to make connections within this place. This is when we move into step number 3 of the breakthrough. At some point, information reorganizes enough that we have a break. There's suddenly a new memory or a new idea. And we have these light bulbs turning on in our brain. And sometimes it happens just in one flash. And sometimes it's a process of these little things that happen to turn into one experience that this awareness happens. And our brain releases this feel-good chemical called dopamine. And it gives us that excited feeling and makes that moment of breakthrough so memorable. Now, we're not done. Just having this break in the case or break in that wall that we feel like we're up against isn't the end of a breakthrough. We actually have to now move through the wall. That aha moment or that moment of identification is a fantastic place to be, but now we get to walk through it. And that's this fourth step. That's when our cognitive control network, which is essentially a term to describe your executive functioning of your brain, the part of your brain that sets goals and creates a plan, that part of your brain gets to verify this break you've had, this insight or aha you've had. And it consolidates it and turns it into actionable understanding. It helps you get a concrete plan and move forward to make those changes that need to happen to ultimately resolve that wall that's been there in your life. So if you noticed in step number 1, there's a lot of frustration when we engage in a breakthrough experience. Even though we talk about breakthroughs like they're this amazing experience of going to Disneyland, and they are, the felt or lived experience often feels more like trudging up a mountain in the dead of winter. There's a lot more discomfort that's there. So what do we do as we engage with a breakthrough? I want to just offer some ideas, see what resonates for you. The first one is that breakthroughs often come with disorientation or instability. Their fundamental purpose is to change us, right? We move from one state of being to another. If we look at the Aldrich Ames case, the CIA itself changed its policies and procedures because of this experience. It allowed them as an entire organization to evolve, but that's never comfortable. So when our familiar gets unsettled, things can feel really strange, ambiguous, not quite rooted. And because we're between this old and new frame, it often feels like we've just landed in a new country and we don't know the language, we don't know the customs, we have no sort of institutional memory about how to engage here. So it can take a lot more space, a lot more time. We can feel restless, we can feel afraid like something's off because we are not in that space of comfort. So what do we do? This is where it can be really helpful to identify something that is bigger than you. We need anchoring in this time. When that ground beneath us shifts, what are we holding on to? I often invite people to consider, do you have a higher power? Do you have something you believe in that is bigger than you, that you can anchor to or put your trust in while everything underneath you feels shaky? Those who are able to anchor to something bigger than them often find that they're able to renew some of that stamina. And they're able to have a sense of calm or relax because they are trusting in something or someone who knows more than them. This leads to feelings of peacefulness and security in the midst of the instability. Okay, number 2, oftentimes when we go through a breakthrough, we feel a lot of doubt because in the midst of this process, things feel like they're breaking down. Oftentimes when something breaks in your life, that feels like a cause for concern. And sometimes it feels like, what's wrong? It almost sends a warning to our system saying something is wrong here. There's a failure. Breakthroughs happen not because our system has failed, but because the system's intelligence is outgrowing itself. We're moving to a new level. And if we can stay present with that tension, recognize that safety indicator signal that's saying, watch out, something's wrong here, and we can reframe that. We can trust the process. We can act with curiosity instead of fear. What feels like chaos can become the doorway to new insight, growth, possibility. So it can be really helpful to reframe things. So when we feel that ambiguity, we might tell our system, I recognize this feels like a threat, but it's information. And this lack of clarity is maybe revealing where more learning or communication or creative problem solving is needed. And when I feel stressed or doubt or just overwhelmed, maybe I can reframe that to be a sign of growth and not weakness. A third awareness about the pattern of breakthroughs is that oftentimes they take time. And most of us don't really enjoy spending a lot of time in a stretched place, right? We can only hold that weight in our weight training for so long before our muscles are tired and they don't want to hold that anymore. We recognize our muscles breaking down and rebuilding, and that's how I grow my muscle, but it's not comfortable, and usually it takes a while. When we keep that patience and persistence, we allow the breakthrough to fully run its course. But how do we do this when we're growing tired? Oftentimes it's helpful to remember our why. When my kids were growing up, one of my children was really struggling with school. It was really difficult for them. And as I went through this breakthrough experience and all the frustration and the walls and the trying new opportunities, we finally had a break in our own case, if you will, when we recognized that a lot of this child's symptoms were consistent with dyslexia. That break allowed us to move through the process of educating in a new way. We were able to have new strategies, new approaches, new expectations that allowed school and learning to more fully fit that child rather than that child fitting into a box that didn't work for them. During this process, it was several years, and I couldn't understand everything, and I was so confused. And that why was a thing that allowed me personally to go back and feel re-strengthened. And that why was, I care about my child. I want my child to have the best possible experience, opportunities, and to feel whole and loved within themselves. And that why kept me going when things were really difficult and when I didn't have those answers and awareness. So what is your why? What is that thing that you can come back to when you're slogging up that mountain and feeling like the wind is really strong and I just want to lie down and take a nap? Let's turn to nature for just a minute. A crustacean, like a crab or a lobster, goes through a process called molting. Now, if you've seen a crab or a lobster, you know they have this skeleton, this hard skeleton. Well, that skeleton doesn't grow with their body. As their body grows, there's a moment in time where they have to have a break from that skeleton. That's actually quite helpful to them. The skeleton is protective. It's kept them safe. It's been the way they've moved around in the world. But during this molting phase, they have to break with that skeleton, leave it with their soft underbody into this space of high vulnerability so that this new skeleton, one that's larger, one that can fit their new state of being, can emerge. This molting process isn't one of weakness. This is actually the organism's deep intelligence that is able to go through this process of expansion and moving to its next level. The crab doesn't molt because something's wrong with it. It molts because it's alive and it's progressing and it needs more room. Breakthroughs are rarely comfortable. They feel like disruption and chaos, but that tension is exactly what allows intelligence, yours, your teams, your families, your organizations, to outgrow itself and grow into something bigger. So the next time you feel the pressure, the doubt, the uncertainty, or the sense that your world is falling apart, remember the crab and remember this: breakthrough is happening. Perhaps you're simply in the space of that molten part of the transformation. The former CEO of Yahoo, Marissa Mayer, said this, quote, "I always did something I was a little not ready to do. I think that's how you grow. When there's that moment of, wow, I'm not really sure I can do this, and you push through those moments, that's when you have a breakthrough." End of quote. I'm so glad you would join me today. I hope this episode leaves you feeling a little lighter, a little braver, and a little more curious about the breakthroughs already unfolding in your life. If you found this episode helpful, I'd invite you to pass it along to someone else who might find similar benefit. Thanks for joining me today. Until we meet again.